In the United States, black codes were laws passed by southern states in 1865 and 1860 after the Civil War. These laws had the intent and the effect of restricting African Americans' freedoms and compelling them to work in the labor economy based on low wages or debt. Black codes were part of the larger pattern of Southern whites trying to suppress the new freedom and of emancipated African American slaves' freedom. From the colonial period, the colonies and states had passed laws that discriminated against free blacks. In the South, these were generally included slave codes. The goal was to reduce influence of free blacks, particularly after slaves' rebellion, because of their potential influence on slaves. Restrictions included prohibiting them from voting, bearing arms, gathering in groups for worship, and learning them to read and write. A major purpose of these laws was passed to preserve slavery. In the first 2 years after the Civil War, white-dominated Southern legislatures passed black codes modeled after the earlier slave codes. These were particularly concerned with controlling movement and labor, as slavery had given way to a free labor system. Although freedmen had been emancipated, their lives were greatly restricted by the black codes.
Jim Crow laws. From 1880s and the 1860s, the majority of American states enforced the segregation through Jim Crow laws in the history of the law that enforced national segregation in the South between the end of the former, which of the states of the local law in the United States indicated between 1876 and 1965. Segregation laws of black and white in the public places. The segregations of public places for the black and white people confirmed by the creations of Jim Crow laws. The public places included the restaurants, transportation, schools, and restrooms. The black people were not given any right to vote in elections. The enforcement of Jim Crow laws. The Jim Crow laws were enforced by the government at the end of the 1800s until the beginning of the 1900s. The laws were formed after the period of restriction in the southern states. Names. They were curious in the origins of the names and of the Crow law, given quite unique. The names was delivered from the African American people they to call Jim Crow laws. Purpose of Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws were created to keep away the black people from the people's community. They wanted black people to be isolated from the important public places. Alabama. Alabama could be seen when colored people and white people were given the different tickets, windows, and waiting rooms. Mississippi. In Mississippi, the prison wardens were given more facility by having different apartments to sleep and eat. In Georgia, the burden for white people was very exclusive, since officers were not allowed to bury any colored people in the burial, and white people in the burials with white people. In Florida, Jim Crow laws affected the additional background. The schools of black people and white people should be different.
On March 17, 1965, even as the Selma to Montgomery marchers fought for their right to carry out their protests, President Lyndon Johnson addressed a joint session of Congress, calling for federal voter rights legislation to protect African Americans from barriers that prevented them from voting. That August, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act, which guaranteed the right to vote to all African Americans. Specifically, the Act banned literacy tests as a requirement for voting, mandated federal oversight of voter registration in areas where tests had previously been used, and gave the U.S. Attorney General the duty of challenging the use of poll taxes for state and local elections. In early 1965, Martin Luther King Jr.'s Southern Christian Leadership Conference made Selma, Alabama, the focus of his effort to register black voters in the South. That March, protesters attempting to march from Selma to the state capital of Montgomery were met with the violent resistance by state and local authorities. As the world watched, the protesters finally achieved their goal, walking around the clock for 3 days to reach Montgomery. The historic march and King's participation in it greatly helped raise awareness of the difficulty faced by black voters in the South and the need for a Voting Rights Act passed later that year.